Welcome to the Catholic Table Talk podcast. This is where everything Catholic is on the table. New episodes Thursdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on most podcast platforms. Here's your host, William Sauber.
And welcome back to the podcast along here at Catholic Table Talk. Thank you again for joining us on another great episode today. What do I mean by great? Well, it's great and challenging, you could say. We're going to talk about the Martyrs Walk and what that all entails, because we know that Lent is basically right around the corner. It's only like 2 weeks away from when this episode comes out. So again, it's if you're not sure what you're going to do for Lent, which I think a lot of Catholics are still trying to figure out what to do for Lent. Some of you might don't come up with a Lenten planning until like Fat Tuesday, right? It's kind of like the day before Lent, and you're like, I should probably throw something together for Lent. And this is not just for Lent. This is the whole year through. Like we're in Exodus right now, but this is the whole year through. You can kind of take part of this, of the Martyrs Walk is called, and the challenge, and it's really a true meaning of who is God calling you to be, the person that God wants you to be. So we're going to talk about with Jason Morphy in just a moment about the challenge and the Martyrs Walk. Again, make sure you like, subscribe, and share the show with your friends and family. Leave us a review. If you have a show or speaker request, please email us at catholictt@gmail.com. Again, it's Catholic with two T's at gmail.com. Also, our website, catholictabletalk.com. It's updated daily, so go on and check that out, catholictabletalk.com. Also, today's sponsor is Dr. George Saguma. Dr. George Saguma is a family physician who practices holistic health and healing. Find more at drgeorge.com. Thank you again, Dr. George, for sponsoring another episode. All right, so again, the Martyrs Walk. Well, it's, I'm more like kind of made Jason share a little bit of his background too, but I mean, what is it? What is it about? The Martyrs Walk is this because your struggles are our struggles. So, Jason Morphy is the founder. He came from a difficult childhood, and having divorced parents and being exposed to abuse, he was raised a cradle Catholic, but practicing his faith wasn't his priority. This difficult upbringing led him to abusing drugs and alcohol with addiction to pornography. He had no direction or focus in life since he lacked good role models or faith, which led him into deep depression and complicating suicide, which in today's world, right, that's a lot of people. A lot of people are dealing with mental health. So Jason's friend saw a crucifix hang on his wall one day, which his devout grandmother had gifted him. He assumed Jason was Catholic, so he invited him to return to Mass after not practicing his faith for years, and that Sunday changed Jason's life forever, where he experienced deep reverence, tradition, and beauty in that Mass, and began attending Mass each week. So again, and he found it it's the Martyrs Walk. He's been on multiple shows and networks, including a couple weeks ago we had Bear Wozniak on. He was on his show recently. So let's welcome into the first time Jason Morphy, the founder of the Martyrs Walk. So Jason, thank you for what you do and your witness to the faith, and thank you for the time today.
Yeah, William, thanks for having me on. It's been a long time coming. I think we crossed paths, oh gosh, maybe close to a year ago, and we
Right.
tried a couple times, and life took off, and I think you moved and I moved, and everything else came in between. So I'm glad that Providence has, provided that we get to be here today and talk. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad it finally worked out. I'm the same boat as you. So
That's right.
so yeah, if you could talk a little bit maybe more about yourself and the background, the Martyrs Walk, and then talk about the Martyrs Walk challenge that I know it's really kind of signature of the Martyrs Walk ministry.
Yeah. So, as you read, that's kind of my biography there on the website, kind of tells a little bit about my history, my upbringing. obviously brought up cradle Catholic, nominal Catholic, not a very practicing Catholic family. But my grandmother, she was a very devout lady, and all along my childhood into my teens and young adulthood, she was always there, mailing me holy cards or scapulars or any number of things, letters to inspire me and all that. And as someone who wasn't practicing the faith, it was nice. It was a nice thing. I always
Sure.
appreciated her doing it, but I never would understand really what it was about. But fast forward to the lowest point of my life, spiritually, mentally, when I was about 20 years old, that, one of those things that she provided to me, that crucifix she gave me, many years uh, past, ended up being um, the pivot, the milestone of the changing of my life. Because without that crucifix on my wall, that for some reason, it was just a nice thing to do, hang a cross
Sure.
on the wall, right? Did I have much devotion to it? No. Did I ever kneel before it and pray? No. It was just there. It was a nice thing, unfortunately, a cultural thing that not most, sorry, I shouldn't say most, but many Catholics these days, unfortunately, fall into. And that crucifix uh, prompted a conversation with a friend. And through that, through the many years, kind of like, Saint Monica and Saint Augustine, those many years and prayers for Saint Augustine.
Right.
Eventually, in the strangest of times, it comes to fruition and brings you back, right? And that's what we hope. That's what we do. That's what our life's about: discipleship and seeds. And thanks be to God, due to my grandmother's faithfulness and her planting of seeds, I can now, live a life of faith and try to bring as many folks back around with me, including my own family, my children, whom I have six. The men around me that I'm blessed to be a part of, whether it's the men's conference, the Knights of Columbus, or the Martyrs Walk. Just a very impactful change in my projection as a young man. So that's kind of how it all came to be. And eventually spent a little time in a traditional seminary up your way, um, in Minnesota years ago. And that time of formation and being around other men, I think, helped to build the foundation of who I am, and God's call for my life to assist other men in finding Him, in this world, which is just so full of distractions and discouragement and everything that it can to pull you away from your path and your purpose. Those days, those early days in my young 20s, I think being around other men and having that time of prayer, it really projected me into that men's kind of leadership capacity that I felt called to help other men. From there, I went to, got out of the seminary, joined the Knights of Columbus. I helped to bring in new guys involved with the Knights. In 2010, we founded the Catholic Men's Conference of the Carolinas, which we just celebrated our 15th year anniversary this past Saturday. Had a beautiful event in
Congratulations.
Charlotte. Yeah, about 300 guys showed up, two bishops, lots of priests. So it was a phenomenal conference with guys all across, coming from the southeast and northeast, even as far out as Texas, down in Florida. Um, so through the men's conference, I started a Catholic radio show about, 4 years ago. I did for about 3 years here in the Charlotte area. And through that kind of direction God pulled me into, I was able to meet a lot of other men across the country and interview them, kind of like what you do, hear their stories, their reversion or conversion stories. And through that, I, felt God continuing to pull and to call me to maybe a more of a leadership role, a more intensive role. And that eventually led to the Martyrs Walk, which is, pretty highly intensive event. We're still trying to figure out, how it all is going to work, how it does work. We're about in May of this year, we'll be 2 years into it. We have our, I think, fifth event coming up this March. And so, it's all kind of evolving, and I'm just kind of trying to let God take and lead where he wants us to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, God really, he works through others to bring people back to the faith. He works through things that bring people back to the faith or to the faith. Um, I mean, when you're sharing your story there, I mean, it's really inspiring because again, your great, grandmother sending you gifts, and it's like you said, it's kind of society. You weren't doing the things that you should have been because again, you were away from your faith. Which, though, again, I agree with you that I feel like quite a few Catholics don't practice the stuff like you mentioned. They see the crucifixion of wow, yeah, and they're reminded by it, but it's nothing. They don't go deeper than that, and. And like the new pastor that was just getting installed here, Jason Arpios, he was a Baptist pastor before he became Catholic,
Mhm.
and his conversion was at the Baptist um wait service, I should say, and he was doing the kind of the communion at the Baptist church, and he just kind of started crying. He's like, I can't do this anymore because I just don't believe it. So it is. It's kind of torn on back to God, and again, it takes time. But um, I guess I should say, looking back, let's just say like coming out of high school. So when you graduated high school, because like you said, you hit your low point about 12 years old. Coming out of high school to where you are today, if I told you at 18 where you are, where you're going to be today, what would you say of that?
Uh, Gosh, I mean, I was on the paths of destruction, jail, divorce, addiction, um, death, that poor kid, he was very lost. He was, man, I don't know. I don't even know where I was. I was just, I was not happy. I definitely was searching. I think I was always searching, even into my late teens, early, right before hitting, 2021,
Or,
even at the involved with drugs and alcohol. I really was just dissatisfied with the status quo, with the way things were, just the facade, I think, that the world is in a lot of ways, if you don't understand like the full idea of creation and a creator and salvation, and a savior. It's just an empty shell, otherwise. And I wasn't satisfied with that. I was never satisfied. I think I was more about being distracted because I was so bored with the status quo. I was bored with the way things were and the way, the life that I was living, the life that I was around. And I was definitely searching. I definitely had, the moments, whether it was late at night, being out much later than I should have been, doing, lots of things I shouldn't have been doing, where there was that curiosity, I think. And thanks be to God that was there. And of course that is there. It's in all of us, right?
right.
It's innate in us to want God. We are his creation. And so it's built in for us to find him and be with him. And I think, reflecting now, I certainly wouldn't have recognized this at 18 or 20 years old. But looking at it now, I mean, obviously his hand was, he was pursuing me. Um, and that's very humbling. It really rocks you to the core when you kind of start to get even a small understanding of that relationship, of how much we are all loved, each one specifically, infinitely. And it's a very sad thing to understand if you look at it in a certain way, that most people, are not recognizing these days and not taking the time to find that out. Thanks be to God, it was a very combined effort of lots of bad things happening, all at once,
Right.
that really put me, on the ground. And and I did. Ultimately, when I was going through those very difficult times and I got in some trouble and all my friends that I thought were friends were gone and I really didn't have anything left. I had a dog. I had a Dalmatian at the time. His name was Boone. He was the best dog ever. And I just cried to that dog. I spent a lot of nights just crying and praying. And I didn't even know what prayer was, but just pleading, I think, more than praying, God help me, please help me. I can't sustain this. I have nothing left. There's got to be something, and that's about the time when, I started kind of really losing hope. But that friend, thankfully, was around and saw that crucifix, and that was the pivotal point of my life. Yeah. I mean, it's nothing short of a miracle. All the cards were stacked up against me if I look at it. Going back to the divorce and the abuse and the drugs and the addictions, and all the odds were against me, and there still was hope. And I think I would scream that to anyone out there, that think there's no hope. There's always hope. And I just know it because I've lived it, and I've seen where you can be and where you can go to, if there's that small bit of hope and that small willingness to cooperate with God's grace.
Right, absolutely. And I think, I mean, again, I would say this again because I think it needs to be said. I mean, it's a lot. You're not the only one who went through it, and I mean, there's a lot of people, young men, young women, it doesn't have to be young, but they're going through the same thing that you did. So, and yes, there's always hope. Like, when we first came on, he asked me how my day was going. How you doing today? I'm like, well, I mean, I could be better, but it's still sunny outside. Still, it's still a good day. It's still in good health. So, I always be thankful for kind of and conditioning and trusting God. And like you said, there's always hope at the end, no matter where you're at in life. So,
That's right.
very, very, very. Thank you for sharing your witness to that,
Sure.
Jason. I'm sure, hopefully, that is helping someone out there who's listening to this right now. So why is the Martyrs Walk challenge, maybe a ideal thing for a let or for doing a let to Exodus 90? Because again, if we do the same old routine every let, just give up sweets, we're not really going deeper, right?
Right.
So, I mean, what really makes this challenge unique and different from anything else you might do?
Sure. Yeah. So Exodus 90, that's a great program. I've done that in the past as well. And it is a great process to maybe start to shatter some of those old scales, right? That we build up and we cover up with, and and start to, they become habitual perhaps, and maybe sinful, and they slowly pull away. It's like venial sin. It's not mortal sin. They'll never, no number of venial sins will equal a mortal sin, but they just are a weakening. They're a slight weakening, a slight degree off course, and before you know it, you're way off course. And so the decision to commit perhaps mortal sin is that much easier. So Exodus 90, I think it has a lot of components. Obviously, the physical, breaking down, the cold showers, the fasting, the removing from television, electronics, and then the brotherhood, right? Because when I went through, that was an impactful time to be able to meet weekly with these guys, share what you're going through in that journey. So I think that's a great program. We've had guys actually that have come on the Martyrs Walk who were doing the Exodus 90 while they came on the Martyrs Walk. So those guys are superheroes, right? They're really taking it to the next level. But why the Martyrs Walk? I still, I don't know if I'll ever fully comprehend why God led me to founding the Martyrs Walk. I just kind of cooperate as best I can, but I think it's a very intensive process. It's kind of like an Exodus 90 crammed into 3 days. A lot of the same goals and outcomes. Um, Digging deep, within yourself, joining and being a part of a brotherhood to go there. So we basically, it's a combination boot camp and Ignatian retreat. So an Ignatian retreat, obviously a wonderful exercise set up by St. Ignatius of Loyola. Traditionally, I think as it was founded, was more of a 30-day process. Of course, that's very difficult for most guys. So I think it's very common for a week long or even a weekend long. It'll be kind of be broken up. So I had done many Ignatian retreats through my reversion and just, vocational discernment, and they were very impactful. They're great. They're wonderful. Um, the boot camp certainly is there as a tried and true exercise and used by, military for ages, just because of the bond that it creates with the men, right? It takes them, it tears them down, it builds them up together. And primarily the outcome of that process is to, make sure you don't leave a man behind, right, on the battlefield. So taking that idea, that concept, but using it in a spiritual manner, because obviously much more important than a physical battle is our spiritual battle. And so tearing them in down, building them back up together in a brotherhood so that they don't leave a man behind out there in the spiritual realm, because these men who go through, they're, maybe you and me, we're not standing shoulder to shoulder on an established front to wage physical battle, but you and I every day are in a spiritual war, right? And
Yeah.
so we are standing shoulder to shoulder, just not physically, but spiritually, we're fighting the same enemy, we're fighting the same battle. And so kind of using that idea of the boot camp, but taking it to a different level, taking it to a higher plane, not just the physical, but also the spiritual, and then combining it with the spiritual lessons of Saint Ignatius, death, judgment, heaven, and hell, and really taking them, I think, just to a higher understanding that most guys probably wouldn't get to on their own. It's kind of like the idea of a hot stove, to tell someone that the stove is hot who's never felt hot before, they can only really comprehend that in so much that you could describe yourself. But it's almost like a person without, a sense of sight, or, to describe something to them. They're really never going to truly understand it unless they see it. And in this case, if the hot stove, to understand what fire or stove or any of those things are, you have to touch them. So, I've said many times in many different venues that, I'm okay if my kids touch the hot stove or the hot pan or whatever. I don't want them to get injured. I don't want to have to go bring them to the hospital. But if it helps them to understand, like, this is a danger, I'm okay with that. And so I think what we do at the Martyrs Walk is we really help men understand in a very intensive mental, physical, and spiritual way, like the true consequences of sin. And the resulting of that, if you live a life of that, is hell. And we know these days that hell is not very welcome in most churches. It's not discussed. You don't hear it often from the homilies, but everyone thinks everyone goes to heaven. All dogs go to heaven, right? Well, even our Lord says, enter through the narrow gate, and many are called, few are chosen. So we know that sadly, most will not heed his call. On the Martyrs Walk, we can't kill anyone. We can't permanently injure anyone. But we can take them to a place through a physical, spiritual, and mental process where they can realize, in a more profound way, what the consequences of their sin might have if they don't, change their ways. If they don't, refocus and start, shedding away some of these habits, these bad behaviors, or even those laziness. Not all guys that come on the Martyrs Walk are, a bunch of hardened sinners committing mortal sin. Actually, most of the guys that come on the Martyrs Walk are very practicing Catholics, who go to mass regularly, who go to confession regularly, who pray regularly. So, every man can be challenged to more. I know myself, I can always be challenged to more. I'm called to more. My excuses, my laziness, my complacency, that's always a battle I'm going to have. And so I think, it's a great event. Most of the guys, I would say every guy that came through would say, like, I didn't realize how much I needed that, so there's always a sharpening to be done, right? We know that a dead fish goes with the flow. So, if you're not moving, forward, you're certainly start to move back. So that's some of the ideas and the principles behind what we do at the Martyrs Walk.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, like, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but on the phone, you said that it was like you mostly do the retreats or the challenge in Carolina. Is there like a particular place that you do the challenge from?
Yeah, so right now we're based out of South Carolina. Um, it's about 30 minutes from the Charlotte airport, Charlotte, maybe 40 minutes from downtown Charlotte. We've been contacted from people in many different countries, Canada, Mexico, New Zealand, um, England, Australia. Can you bring the Martyrs Walk to us? And that's something that I've pondered. It's right now with just getting it off the ground and being local and having facilities local. Um, that's where we are. Is there a future where perhaps we go and we train other men to go through it? I would certainly be open to that. I spoke to a guy in Australia the other day, and I said, you know what, if I know you will obviously not be able to come to the United States, at least with a group, or maybe not in the near future, but I would certainly be open if I could give you a list of what we would need, have a facility that would cater to what we need to as far as room and board and things like that. Yeah, I'll go down under and teach the guys and run these guys through and see. But yeah, we get guys from all across the United States. I think it would be a benefit if somehow, some way, it were able to be more localized. We have trends. It is more of a charity. It does cost. It does cost to go on the Martyrs Walk. But I say very clearly in the Q&A when you're reading to the site, we won't turn away any man due to price. Like Mother Teresa says, God will provide. If a man really feels called to take part in the walk, we'll do what we can. We'll talk to the alumni, the guys who've gone through. We'll see if there's any scholarship funds available or donations. Because a lot of guys that go through will turn around and pay for the following guy to go through. And so it's an interesting kind of pay it forward process. But yeah, I'm certainly open to having regional areas and other countries. It's because it's what happens on the Martyrs Walk is very special, even for the guys that are facilitating the event, not just the ones going through it. And so we do see a lot of guys that have gone through it who come back and they assist with the next walk because it is that important to really to go through it and reflect yourself. It's almost like a retreat for us as we lead these men. And then it's just so impactful to see this group of strangers show up, all striving for more, looking for God, and then becoming this unit and this brotherhood. It's a very special thing. I'm very blessed and honored to have been a part of it, and I don't know what the future holds, but I know at this point I'm happy with what we've accomplished thus far.
Like, yeah, that was my next question I was gonna ask because it's like you said, it's not like everyone who goes on the walk is, on the challenge on the retreat is very grave singer. It's not like, I mean, yeah, a lot of people have addictions. A lot of people can't get out of the habitual sin, which is maybe most of the time more and more to maybe than venial. But but again, you said there's a lot of good practicing Catholic men. Again, like you said, mass day regularly, confession regularly. So that was my next question. Is like if someone from around the country was like, "Hey, do you do an online event, or do you, that was my next question. So yeah, if someone, let's just say someone in Washington is listening right now, what is the best way to do the Martyrs Walk? Is it like what you said, go through the steps, see a scholarship, fly into Carolina? What would the next steps be to proceed if someone's interested?
Yeah. Um, it's an in-person event, so there's really not any sort of live or virtual. It is an in-person event. I don't know if it would ever even be possible to be a virtual. Like I said, I think having perhaps regional communities set up that could facilitate it, maybe a northeast, a southeast, and a Midwest, Midwestern, throughout the country, maybe pop up like groups of fraternists or groups of Exodus 90, things like that. And it's not just Catholics. We've had non-Catholics come be a part. We had a Messianic Jewish individual who was extremely impacted by it. We get questioned all the time by non-Catholics about it. And yes, we're going to use the traditions, the lessons, the teachings of the Catholic Church, which have been, proved throughout the ages of their how important they are to our salvation. But it's not a conversion camp. And I don't think there's anything that anyone have to fear that, oh, they're going to get in there and try to convert them to be a Catholic. No, we're just going to, lead you through the process, and, whatever happens afterwards is between you and God. But to answer your question, if there was someone in another state or city, the first step is, of course, to read through the site, and kind of gather all the information, because there's lots of information out there. It's a different type of event. There's a lot of things to kind of familiarize yourself with. And then I would say, firstly, pray, pray, discern. If God, is calling you to be a part of that, then it's very simple. They would just fill out the a little application, very simple, small application. And then we follow up with a phone call just to, get to know them, let them ask questions, get to know us, kind of, what to maybe expect. And then from there, we would set them up for the next walk, and kind of go from there. It's interesting, there's no caffeine on the walk. There's no alcohol, obviously, no tobacco. There's no cell phones, no sugar, no sweets. It's a stripping away. And a lot of guys will say, oh, well, I can't give up coffee for that long. And I'm like, really? You walk around and you could say you give up your life and lay down your life for your faith or your family, but you can't give up coffee. I like coffee just as much as the next guy.
Yeah.
I like my coffee black. I like it every morning. But, when it comes down to it, could I sacrifice that? Absolutely. So it's a stripping away. And I think a lot of guys, our goal is to push them further than they've ever been pushed, physically, mentally, and spiritually. I've heard that, like, the human mind, we start to retreat. We start to think we're dying at about 40% pain tolerance. Once that 40% kicks in, we start the fight or flight, like, uh-oh, got to get out of here. But we're going to take these guys from, if 40 is their number, and we're going to bring them up to about 80. And they'll be able to stand at 80 or 85 and look back and be like, wow, I was very limited. Look at the limitations I put on myself. Look at the limitations that I was convinced that the world, the flesh, or the devil, had convinced me of otherwise. And I think that gives a catalyst. It's a strengthening in their vocation as whatever it is in life, whether it's a single man or a father, or someone maybe discerning, a vocation, to be able to look and say, you know what, I am capable of more, and I am going to hold myself to a higher standard. And not only me, but now I have these brothers with me that they're going to hold me to the higher standard. And that's the big takeaway, is having that band of brothers at the end of the day.
That is, I mean, being on a seminary visit myself, thinking about disowning the priesthood, Jason, it's just, leaving the seminary, it's a brotherhood. People say,
Right.
I mean, Exodus 90, it's a brotherhood. You see them weekly, and you really build the love of each other, the confidence, the trust of each other, and that's what we should be doing more often. And for the pain tolerance, I mean, I would say I'm probably more like a 20. I don't know. You can ask
Oh,
you can
yeah.
ask my family. I just don't really deal with pain or other stuff very well.
You
So
live
that
in
might
Minnesota. You must be able to handle some sort of pain, because I can't even live in Minnesota. That, for me, that's the hardest thing. So you must be doing
yeah,
pretty good.
I'm doing okay. It's winter is not my favorite thing, but
Yeah.
we get by. At least I do. But
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean that when you were talking about that might just for myself would be a great advantage. I feel for that. But I think I mean with all the men that have gone through the Martyrs Walk so far, Jason, and I think I know if I did it, and I would probably say one of the reasons why maybe I'm hesitant in doing it is because, well, maybe sure it's in South Carolina, but I mean, maybe it's like, well, I just don't have time. I don't want to give up my coffee. But from what other men have gone through, and they come back to you afterwards and say, man, I'm so glad I did it. I wish I, was not so afraid or whatever. But what is the biggest thing that is stopping men that you have heard um of why they're not, doing the Marches Walk?
Yeah. I think we're fishing from a real small pond.
Okay.
So, first off, you have to find a guy who is at least seeking, at least looking for more in it, maybe in his faith, at least wanting more, and wanting to do better, right? And these days we know guys are very comfortable and they're very, just kind of stuck in their routine and just, put things off and a life of ease. And that's what this world does. It creates this life of ease. And, we've and that life of ease, um, it makes us feel that we're in control, I think. And that's why our Lord, he says, it's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get to heaven. And maybe not all comfort and ease is due to wealth, but in a sense, if you're comfortable, you could be living at home and not have any debt because maybe your parents or you're living with family, and it's that's a life of ease. It might not be a life of wealth and riches, but you might be comfortable there and you might not be challenging yourself there. So to be able to step out of what's comfortable and push into, what God wants from you. And that's the defining, line there is like, what is God calling you to? And sometimes we block that out. So, each guy that would come on to the walk, and I think that's another thing. I think everyone thinks it's so extreme and so difficult that they couldn't do it. Because I mean, look at it these days. Who does anything difficult these days? Right? I mean, who challenges themselves? Who does the fasting? Who does the abstinence? Who does the extreme workouts? Who holds their body and their mind and their soul to higher standards? I mean, please God, we all are, but in reality, that's just not a priority these days, right? It's comfort, it's ease, it's immediate gratification. And so I think to answer that question is, we're not going to challenge someone who's, let's say, 70 years old the way we're going to challenge someone who's 20 years old. And we, by the way, had a man that was 73 who went through our last event back in October, and he did stellar. He did great. Was there some adaptation to the things he had to do? Yeah. But overall, he was in pretty good shape for a 73-year-old. I'm 50, and I know I'm in better shape than the average 35-year-old. I mean, and that's a fact. That's, so I hope when I'm 70, if I had the opportunity to go on the Martyrs Walk, they wouldn't say, well, you're 70, so you can't go. I'm saying, well, I'll get a letter from my doctor and I'll show you I'm in good shape. So I think, letting guys know that each to his own, we're going to get to know you. We're going to challenge you to your abilities. We're going to kind of break in there and show you like, hey, you're capable of more, man. You can do more. So I think that's it. I think being afraid to step out of our comfort zones, that's a big part of it. I mean, so many guys, people I've talked to, everybody says, oh, this is wonderful. This is what men need. This is what everybody should be doing. And at the end of the day, after 2 years, we're at 26 guys who've actually stepped up and done it. So, number two, I would say that the financial part of it, getting there, and I understand that's a real thing. Even if it was a free event, you've got to take off work, perhaps you've got to get an airplane or you have to drive out there. So I think that's a limitation. And that's kind of why we removed that limitation. But the funny thing is, we've offered free passes to numerous guys, well-known guys that you would know that haven't taken us up on that. And I get it. Everybody's busy. Everybody has their own routine. And I'm not saying that this is the best thing out there. There are certainly other ways about holiness and formation and bettering yourself. This is one tool, but we've removed the price for the most part, in the sense that, okay, if that's the biggest hurdle, now it's gone. Now what are you going to do? So we hope that maybe that model will play out. And if not, I think the development of, regional or other locations might be something down the road that we look at, because if the goal is to get as many men as involved and through the Martyrs Walk as we can, and the limitations are being able to get there, being able to afford it, the next logical, piece of that puzzle is to remove that. But, I don't know. If we set up shop in 10 locations across the country tomorrow and said, hey, this is a free event, come get it, 3 days, I'm pretty sure we'd still have low numbers, but, it'd probably be a little higher. So we'll see, God will provide. I have no doubt.
You will, definitely will. I mean, I think God's provided me with information just through you, Jason, with this interview, Jason, because I'm still nothing against my family, but I'm still living at home with my family, and I'm not wealthy or anything, but again, I'm not maybe challenging myself like you were saying as much as I could be, because it is comforting. You go home and you're with family, and you still have all the food, all the food you want. Just kind of have a lazy weekend, so to say. It's just kind of you just kind of do your own thing. So challenging, I do like that. Um, and I will say this could be maybe the last question, but for in terms of the Mars Walk, I mean, it's is it just for men or can women do it too? Because again, I'm not trying to compare you in Exodus,
Sure.
and even though I keep bringing it up, but like in Exodus, you have Exodus 90 for the men, you have the Megafire 90 for the women,
Okay.
and then back when only men could vote, but then women could vote as well, and I mean I know they still can. So what is there a thing that you can make in the future have for women, or is
I would
that
say that would be something the women would have to come up with. But really, the crisis of our time is manhood.
like
Because for the last 60 years, the women have towed the load. They've stepped up. They've led the families to church. They've been the moral guides. And God bless the women for doing that, but it's not their role.
like
God love the women. I'm not belittling the women. I'm not saying women shouldn't, we're different. Men and women are completely different. We're called to different things. A woman, is more prone to the nurturing, the caring, and the man is more the secure, securing, the protector, provider. And the statistics are out there. When a father is leading his family in faith, by attendance of church, prayer, the numbers are astronomical of how much more percentage that those children brought up in that family are gonna continue in faith. But when the
like
father steps out, the numbers drop drastically. So I think, could there be an event for women? Absolutely, but I think the women would have to want it. That would have to be something that the women, I'd have to see substantial interest from the women and say, okay, well, here are the parameters. If you'd like to take it and conform it, it would have to be run by the women, handled by the women, and absolutely there could be that opportunity. But for now, with what's going on in our world, the biggest problem is the crisis of manhood. It's the crisis of the loss of the father and the family. The domestic church is the bedrock of society. It's been destroyed over the past 60 years with the divorce and fatherless homes. And our children are the ones that have suffered, and our churches are suffering because of that. So I think right now the primary focus is on the man, but certainly, I could see, everyone needs to be challenged. Everyone needs to be more. And I wasn't aware that Exodus 90 had a women's program, but that makes sense. Um, because I'm sure in their way, in a different way, that would help them. That bond for them is I'm sure just as important as it is for men, and the challenging and the lifting up and accountability, all of those things. But yeah, that's a good question though. So we'll see.
awesome. Yeah, and I agree with you with the manhood. We have had, like I said before, you were on the Bear Wozniak adventure just recently, and we have had him on a few times, just even a couple episodes ago. And his show, one of his shows we did last year with him was the biggest of 2024. So I think there is a hunger for become, for to becoming, for being manhood, I should say. So I think there's a hunger for that in young Catholic men. So I think that's a good thing. But again, I think the Martyrs Walk is another great program to go through to really foster that into your homes and to your families, and if not now, maybe in the future when you get married as well. So, Jason, where can they find out more about you and the Martyrs Walk?
Yeah, so themartyrswalk.com. You can just Google the Martyrs Walk and everything will pop right up. We're also on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. But yeah, Google the Martyrs Walk and we'll pop right up. If you just have a question, just send a message through the website and I'd be glad to get back to you and just chat. There's no commitment. I'll be glad to answer any questions, but I would definitely suggest going on the website and really reading through, because there's a lot of good information on there.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, there is. I'm again looking at getting ready for the show. I'm like, man, there's more and more and more. So definitely something to really think about, folks, and really possibly do if God is calling you to do it, like Jason said. So Jason Murphy, again, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your witness and what you do at the Martyrs Walk. And you're welcome back anytime. Hopefully we can talk back soon.
Awesome. Sounds great, William. Thanks for having me. God bless you.
So, Jason Murphy went there again at themartyrswalk.com. We'll have the link in the show notes below for you. Again, be a man, strive for manhood, check out the Martyrs Walk, and again, really pray and really think about, really reflect on what God is calling you to be this Lent, as well as moving forward for the rest of the year and your life. So stay in the state of grace, folks, until next week, and keep plugging along. The way we stay in state of grace is going to the sacraments frequently, and we'll see you next time on Catholic Table Talk.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Catholic Table Talk podcast, where everything Catholic is on the table. Don't forget to subscribe to Catholic Table Talk on your favorite podcast platform to get new episodes delivered directly to you every Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern.